As the legal proceedings against Charles Whittaker dragged on, it became increasingly clear that his life would never be the same. The once proud businessman, who had strutted through elite circles with an air of untouchable privilege, now found himself ostracized by the very world he had tried so desperately to impress. His forced apology, issued in a brief press statement, was met with widespread skepticism. "I deeply regret my actions," he said stiffly, reading from a prepared script. "It was never my intention to cause harm or offense." But few believed him. To many, the apology felt hollow, an attempt to salvage what little remained of his crumbling reputation. The court's decision further sealed his fate. Charles was fined heavily and sentenced to attend mandatory sensitivity training sessions. While these penalties might have seemed lenient on paper, their symbolic weight crushed him. Clients abandoned his business in droves, unwilling to associate with someone embroiled in such controversy. Social invitations dried up entirely, leaving Charles isolated and bitter. Friends who had once laughed at his jokes now avoided eye contact when they passed him on the street. Even his family distanced themselves, embarrassed by his behavior and its consequences. For Marcus Thompson, however, redemption took a different form. The incident had not only brought him recognition, but also opened doors for meaningful change. He began receiving invitations to speak at schools, community centers, and corporate events. At first hesitant to step into the spotlight, Marcus eventually embraced the opportunity to share his story, not as a tale of personal triumph, but as a lesson in resilience and humanity. His talks were powerful yet understated, focusing less on Charles' racism and more on how individuals could rise above hatred. One particularly memorable event took place at a high school in East London. Standing before a diverse group of teenagers, Marcus recounted the confrontation outside Buckingham Palace without dramatizing it. Instead, he emphasized the importance of staying calm under pressure and choosing dignity over anger. "Life will test you," he told them, his voice steady and reassuring. "But how you respond defines who you are. You can let negativity consume you, or you can use it as fuel to become stronger." The students listened intently, hanging on to every word. Afterward, several approached him to express gratitude, sharing their own struggles with bullying or prejudice. One boy, visibly nervous, admitted, "I've been teased because of my accent. Hearing your story makes me feel like I'm not alone." Marcus smiled warmly, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're stronger than you think," he replied. "Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Beyond public speaking, Marcus continued working closely with anti-discrimination organizations. Together, they launched initiatives aimed at educating people about unconscious bias and fostering inclusivity in workplaces and communities. Workshops were organized where participants engaged in open dialogues, learning to empathize with perspectives different from their own. These efforts weren't just about addressing systemic issues. They were about planting seeds of understanding that would grow over time. Meanwhile, Charles' downfall served as a cautionary tale. News outlets occasionally revisited the story, highlighting how quickly arrogance and prejudice could lead to ruin. Some commentators argued that Charles's punishment, though deserved, wasn't enough to undo generations of ingrained biases. Others pointed out that true accountability required more than fines or training. It demanded a fundamental shift in mindset. Regardless of differing opinions, one thing was undeniable. The incident had sparked important conversations about privilege, respect, and equality. Through it all, Marcus maintained his humility. Despite the accolades and admiration, he refused to see himself as extraordinary. "I'm just doing my job," he often said when praised. Yet those around him recognized that his quiet strength made him anything else but ordinary. Whether mentoring young recruits at Buckingham Palace or encouraging strangers during chance encounters, Marcus inspired others to believe in the power of grace and perseverance. By the end of the year, the dust had settled somewhat, but the lessons lingered. For Charles, the road ahead promised little redemption unless he chose to confront his prejudices honestly, a daunting task for someone accustomed to deflecting blame. For Marcus, The journey forward was filled with purpose. Every challenge he faced reminded him of why he stood tall in the first place, not to prove others wrong, but to pave the way for a better future, one act of kindness and courage at a time. In the days following the incident, Marcus Thompson's name became synonymous with courage and resilience. Social media platforms buzzed with hashtags like #StandWithMarcus and #GraceUnderPressure as people from all walks of life rallied behind him. Strangers shared stories of their own encounters with racism, drawing parallels between their struggles and Marcus's calm response to Charles Whittaker's aggression. These posts weren't just expressions of solidarity. They were calls to action, urging society to confront its biases head-on. Local news outlets couldn't get enough of the story. Reporters camped outside Buckingham Palace, hoping to catch a glimpse of Marcus or snag an exclusive interview. While Marcus politely declined most requests, citing his commitment to privacy and duty, a few carefully chosen appearances helped amplify his message. During one televised event honoring public service members, Marcus was invited to speak briefly. Standing before a packed auditorium, he delivered a heartfelt speech that resonated deeply with everyone present. "I never imagined my life would take this turn," he began, his voice steady but warm. "But if sharing my experience can inspire even one person to stand strong in the face of adversity, then it's worth it." He went on to talk about the importance of treating others with kindness and respect, regardless of differences in background or beliefs. His words carried weight, not because they were dramatic, but because they came from genuine conviction. When he finished speaking, the audience erupted into applause, some wiping away tears. The support didn't stop there. Prominent figures across various fields stepped forward to express their admiration for Marcus. A well-known actor tweeted, "Real heroes don't wear capes. They wear uniforms and show us what true strength looks like." An Olympic gold medalist shared a video message thanking Marcus for being a role model for young athletes. Even members of Parliament acknowledged his contributions during debates on equality and inclusion, using his story as proof that progress begins with individuals willing to lead by example. For Marcus, however, the attention was bittersweet. On one hand, he appreciated the outpouring of love and encouragement. On the other, he worried it might overshadow the work he still had to do. As much as he valued recognition, he knew the fight against prejudice wasn't over. Racism wasn't something that could be eradicated overnight. It required consistent effort, education, and empathy. So instead of resting on his laurels, Marcus decided to use his newfound platform wisely. He partnered with anti-discrimination organizations, attending workshops and seminars aimed at fostering inclusivity. At these events, he spoke candidly about his experiences, not to gain sympathy, but to spark meaningful conversations. "It's easy to point fingers when someone behaves badly," he said during one panel discussion. "But real change happens when we challenge ourselves to understand why those behaviors exist, and then work together to dismantle them." His efforts inspired countless others to take similar steps. Teachers incorporated his story into lessons about tolerance and leadership. Parents used it as a teaching moment, explaining to their children why respect matters. Businesses revisited their diversity policies, ensuring they aligned with values of fairness and equality. Slowly but surely, Marcus's quiet determination began creating ripples far beyond what anyone could have predicted. Even within Buckingham Palace, attitudes shifted noticeably. Colleagues who had previously kept their distance now sought opportunities to collaborate with Marcus, recognizing his unique ability to navigate difficult situations with poise. Superiors praised him openly, encouraging younger recruits to emulate his professionalism and integrity. For the first time in years, Marcus felt less like an outsider and more like an integral part of the team. Yet through it all, Marcus remained humble. He avoided grandstanding, choosing instead to let his actions speak louder than any words ever could. Whether patrolling the palace gates or mentoring new guards, he approached every task with the same unwavering dedication that had defined his career thus far. To him, this wasn't about becoming famous. It was about making a difference, no matter how small. As weeks turned into months, the initial frenzy surrounding the incident began to fade, but its impact lingered, woven into the fabric of communities determined to learn from the past. And while Marcus continued his daily routine, he carried with him the knowledge that his quiet strength had ignited something powerful, a collective push toward a more inclusive and compassionate world. The aftermath of the confrontation outside Buckingham Palace unfolded like a storm that refused to settle. As news of the incident spread, Charles Whittaker found himself at the center of a public relations nightmare. Footage of the altercation, captured by onlookers and shared widely on social media, went viral within hours. The video showed Marcus's calm professionalism juxtaposed against Charles's aggressive behavior, leaving little room for interpretation. For many viewers, it was a stark reminder of the prejudices still lurking in society. Charles's attempts to downplay his actions only made things worse. In interviews with local newspapers, he claimed he had been misunderstood and accused Marcus of exaggerating the situation. But his excuses rang hollow. Social media users dissected every frame of the video, pointing out how Charles's body language and tone revealed his true intentions. Memes mocking him began circulating online, turning what should have been a private matter into a national spectacle. Meanwhile, Marcus became an unexpected hero. People praised him not just for his skill in handling the dog, but also for his restraint and dignity throughout the ordeal. Comments flooded in from all corners of the country, celebrating him as a symbol of resilience. One post read, "This is what real strength looks like, staying calm when others try to provoke you." Another added, "Marcus didn't just protect himself, he represented grace under fire." The support wasn't limited to words alone. Protesters gathered outside Charles's business headquarters, holding signs that read, "Respect over racism," and "Justice for Marcus." Their chants echoed through the streets, drawing attention from passersby and journalists alike. Local activists joined the movement, using the incident to highlight systemic issues of discrimination in workplaces and public spaces. Even members of the royal family weighed in, albeit subtly, with one senior official stating, "We stand firmly against any form of prejudice or disrespect toward those who serve our nation." For Marcus, however, the sudden surge of attention was both humbling and overwhelming. He returned to his duties at the palace the next day, determined to maintain his usual routine despite the whirlwind surrounding him. Colleagues patted him on the back, offering words of encouragement, while superiors commended him for upholding the values of the institution. Yet Marcus remained grounded, focusing on the bigger picture rather than basking in personal accolades. Privately, though, he reflected on the weight of the moment. Growing up, Marcus had often felt like an outsider, even after proving himself time and again through hard work and dedication. Whether it was during his military service or his transition to royal security, there were always whispers questioning whether he truly belonged. This incident brought those memories rushing back, but it also reinforced his belief in perseverance. If anything, the widespread support reminded him that change was possible, even if progress came slowly. As legal proceedings against Charles moved forward, authorities charged him with inciting violence and endangering public safety. Fines were imposed, and he was ordered to attend mandatory sensitivity training sessions, a punishment that seemed trivial compared to the damage done to his reputation. Clients distanced themselves from his company, and invitations to elite social events dried up almost overnight. Friends stopped returning his calls, and acquaintances avoided eye contact when they crossed paths. It was as if the world had collectively decided to hold him accountable for his actions. Despite everything, Marcus chose not to gloat or seek revenge. When asked about Charles during a brief interview with a reporter, he simply said, "I don't harbor ill feelings toward anyone. My focus is on doing my job and inspiring others to rise above hatred." His response earned him even more admiration, solidifying his status as a role model for countless individuals facing similar challenges. By the end of the week, the story had evolved beyond its initial shock value. It sparked conversations about privilege, accountability, and the importance of treating everyone with fairness and respect. Schools incorporated discussions about the incident into their lessons, encouraging students to think critically about prejudice and leadership. Community leaders organized workshops aimed at fostering inclusivity, ensuring that the lessons learned from this event would leave a lasting impact. For Marcus, life eventually returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such a high-profile incident. But the ripple effects of that sunny afternoon lingered, reminding everyone involved that bravery isn't always loud or flashy. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and rooted in the unwavering belief that dignity will always triumph over ignorance. As the police officers began sorting out the situation, Charles Whittaker tried to regain control of the narrative. He straightened his suit jacket, attempting to project an air of authority despite the chaos he had caused. "This is ridiculous," he exclaimed, addressing the officers with exaggerated indignation. "That man provoked my dog. I was merely trying to teach him a lesson about discipline and respect." His words fell flat. The crowd around them, now larger than before, exchanged skeptical glances. Many had witnessed the entire incident unfold, the verbal taunts, the deliberate unleashing of the dog, and Marcus's calm yet decisive response. Some shook their heads in disbelief at Charles's audacity to twist the truth so blatantly. Marcus, standing quietly nearby, didn't say much at first. His posture remained composed, his expression unreadable. When one of the officers asked for his account of what happened, he spoke clearly and respectfully, avoiding any hint of accusation or emotion. "Sir," he began, addressing the officer directly, "the individual approached me with aggressive language and then intentionally released his dog, which posed a threat not only to me, but also to others present." The officer nodded, jotting down notes as Marcus continued. "I acted within protocol to neutralize the situation without causing harm to the animal or anyone else." His tone was measured, almost clinical, as if recounting a routine report rather than a personal confrontation. It was then that Marcus revealed something unexpected: his background. Pulling aside his uniform jacket slightly, he displayed a small pin on his label, a badge signifying his former rank as an elite soldier in the British Army. "Before joining Royal Security," he explained, "I served in high-risk operations and led canine units during my military career. Handling situations like this is part of my training." The revelation caught everyone off guard, including Charles. For the first time since the incident began, the arrogant businessman faltered. His face turned pale as he realized he had underestimated the man standing before him. Far from being someone he could intimidate, Marcus was a seasoned professional whose skills far exceeded anything Charles could have imagined. The officers exchanged meaningful looks, their demeanor shifting noticeably. One of them turned to Charles and asked pointedly, "Did you know the guard you were confronting has extensive experience handling dogs, or that he's a decorated ex-military officer?" Charles stammered, unable to form a coherent response. His earlier bravado crumbled under the weight of his own ignorance. Meanwhile, whispers rippled through the crowd as people processed this new information. "He's ex-military." One woman murmured to her companion, "No wonder he handled that dog so well." Another man chimed in, saying, "And here this guy thought he could bully him. What an idiot." Charles tried to salvage his pride by appealing to his status. "Listen, I'm a respected member of society," he insisted, puffing out his chest. "Surely you can see that this is all a misunderstanding. My dog got overexcited. That's all." But his words carried little weight. Even the officers seemed unimpressed, their expressions hardening as they listened to his increasingly desperate attempts to justify his actions. To make matters worse, several witnesses stepped forward voluntarily, eager to share their accounts of what had transpired. A young couple recounted how Charles had verbally attacked Marcus, using derogatory language that left no room for misinterpretation. An older gentleman described the moment the leash was removed, emphasizing that it was clearly intentional. Each testimony painted Charles in an even harsher light, while reinforcing Marcus's professionalism and restraint. As the investigation continued, Marcus chose not to dwell on Charles's behavior. Instead, he used the opportunity to highlight a broader issue. Speaking softly but firmly, he told the officers, "This isn't the first time I've faced prejudice because of who I am. While I appreciate your efforts today, I hope incidents like this remind us all of the importance of treating everyone with fairness and respect, regardless of their background." His words resonated deeply, earning nods of agreement from both the officers and the crowd. Even some of Charles's acquaintances, who had initially stood silently on the sidelines, began inching away from him, visibly uncomfortable with being associated with his actions. By the time the authorities finished gathering statements, it was clear where the fault lay. Charles, once so confident in his superiority, now looked like a man cornered, not just by the law, but by the collective judgment of those around him. And Marcus, though thrust into an unwelcome spotlight, carried himself with quiet dignity, proving that true strength lies not in aggression, but in grace under pressure. As the German Shepherd lunged forward with a ferocious snarl, time seemed to stand still for everyone watching, except Marcus. Years of training and experience kicked in instantly, transforming him from a stoic figure into a master of precision and control. With reflexes honed through countless drills and real-life combat scenarios, Marcus didn't panic or retreat. Instead, he moved with calculated calmness, his body responding instinctively to the threat. The dog's powerful jaws snapped inches away from Marcus's leg as it charged, its muscles rippling with raw energy. But Marcus was ready. In one swift motion, he shifted his weight slightly to the side, avoiding the full force of the attack. His hand shot out like lightning, gripping the dog's collar firmly but without unnecessary force. Using the animal's own momentum against it, Marcus redirected its charge, guiding it safely to the ground in a controlled maneuver. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds, leaving onlookers stunned. For a moment, there was silence. The growling stopped as the German Shepherd found itself pinned gently, but securely under Marcus's steady grip. The dog whimpered softly, clearly confused by the sudden turn of events. Its earlier aggression melted away, replaced by submission. Marcus knelt beside the animal, speaking in a low, soothing tone. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice calm and reassuring. "You're okay." Charles, who had been smirking confidently just moments ago, froze in disbelief. He blinked rapidly, struggling to process what had just happened. His prized K9, a dog trained for obedience and protection, was lying subdued at the feet of the very man he had intended to humiliate. Charles opened his mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. His face flushed red with embarrassment and anger, though whether it was directed at Marcus or his own dog wasn't clear. The crowd, however, erupted into murmurs of astonishment. Some people clapped hesitantly, while others whispered among themselves, their voices filled with admiration for Marcus's composure and skill. A few even pulled out their phones to record the scene, capturing every detail of the unexpected showdown. One elderly woman shook her head disapprovingly at Charles, muttering loud enough for those nearby to hear, "That poor animal doesn't deserve such cruelty." Marcus stood up slowly, releasing the dog's collar once he was certain it posed no further threat. The German Shepherd immediately backed away, retreating to Charles's side with its tail tucked between its legs. It was a stark contrast to the bold confidence it had displayed just moments earlier. Charles reached down to grab the leash, yanking it roughly as if blaming the dog for failing him. The action drew more disapproving looks from the growing audience. Still unfazed, Marcus straightened his uniform and adjusted his cap, ensuring he looked as composed as ever. His breathing remained steady, betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through his veins. To anyone watching, it seemed as though dealing with an aggressive dog was all in a day's work for him. And in many ways it was. But this wasn't over yet. As police officers arrived on the scene, alerted by concerned bystanders, Marcus turned his attention to them. Without raising his voice or showing any sign of hostility, he explained the situation concisely, emphasizing that the dog had been set loose deliberately. His professionalism stood in sharp contrast to Charles's flustered attempts to defend himself, which only made the latter look guiltier with each passing second. As the authorities began questioning both men, Marcus allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. He knew incidents like this were inevitable, given the prejudices he faced daily. Yet, instead of bitterness, he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, not because he had bested Charles or his dog, but because he had handled the situation with dignity and restraint. And deep down, he hoped it might serve as a lesson not just for Charles, but for anyone who doubted his ability to protect and serve with honor. The man approaching Marcus was Charles Whittaker, a name well known in certain circles of London's elite. Wealthy, arrogant, and used to getting his way, Charles carried himself with an air of superiority that made people either admire or despise him. Today, however, his demeanor was far from charming. His jaw was set tight, and his eyes narrowed as he stopped a few feet away from Marcus. The German shepherd at his side growled low, its hackles rising as if sensing its owner's hostility. "Well, well," Charles began, his tone dripping with mockery. "What do we have here? A royal guard who thinks he belongs among the finest traditions of this country." He smirked, glancing around as if seeking approval from the tourists nearby. Some passers-by slowed down, curious about the confrontation unfolding before them. Others quickly looked away, uncomfortable with the tension in the air. Marcus didn't respond. He knew better than to engage with someone clearly looking for a fight. Instead, he stood firm, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze steady. To anyone watching, he appeared completely unfazed by Charles's words. But inside, Marcus felt a flicker of irritation, not because of the insults, but because of the sheer audacity of the man delivering them. Charles took a step closer, his voice growing louder. "Tell me, soldier, do you even know what it means to protect something sacred? Something that represents centuries of heritage?" He gestured dramatically toward the palace gates. "Or are you just here to fill some quota?" A murmur rippled through the small crowd gathering around them. Some people exchanged uneasy glances, while others whispered disapprovingly about Charles's behavior. But Charles seemed oblivious, or perhaps he simply didn't care. His focus was entirely on Marcus, who remained silent, his face unreadable. "You see, I believe certain roles require, let's say, a specific kind of person." Charles sneered, emphasizing his point with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Someone who understands tradition, loyalty, discipline, the values that make Britain great." By now, the German shepherd was straining against its leash, its teeth bared and eyes locked onto Marcus. The dog's aggression was palpable, yet Marcus didn't flinch. Years of military training had taught him how to stay composed under pressure. Still, he couldn't ignore the warning signs. This wasn't just verbal provocation anymore. It was escalating into something potentially dangerous. Charles leaned in slightly, lowering his voice, but making sure it still carried enough for others to hear. "Maybe you need a little reminder of your place," he said coldly. Then, without hesitation, he unclipped the leash from the dog's collar. "Go on, boy," he commanded, pointing directly at Marcus. "Show him what happens when he forgets his manners." Time seemed to slow as the massive canine lunged forward, snarling viciously. For a split second, panic flashed across the faces of the onlookers. Some gasped, others stepped back instinctively, unsure of what would happen next. Charles watched smugly, confident that his prized pet would assert dominance over Marcus. But Marcus wasn't ordinary. If Charles had taken a moment to learn more about the man standing before him, he might have thought twice about unleashing his dog. Instead, arrogance blinded him, setting the stage for a confrontation neither he nor the spectators could have anticipated. In the heart of London, where history met modernity, stood Buckingham Palace, a symbol of tradition and grandeur. Outside its gates, Marcus Thompson took his position, standing tall in his immaculate uniform. His polished boots reflected the soft glow of the morning sun, and his posture was as straight as the rifles carried by the ceremonial guards nearby. But Marcus wasn't just another face in the crowd of royal security personnel. He was different, not only because of the color of his skin, but also because of the weight of his past. Marcus had once been part of an elite unit in the British Army, serving in some of the most dangerous corners of the world. From desert sands to dense jungles, he had faced challenges that tested not just his physical strength, but also his mental fortitude. During those years, he had earned medals for bravery and leadership, yet none of them mattered much to him now. What mattered was his current role, protecting the monarchy and upholding the dignity of the institution he served. Despite his accomplishments, life outside the battlefield wasn't always smooth sailing. Racism lingered like a shadow, even in places as prestigious as Buckingham Palace. Some visitors would glare at him, their eyes filled with suspicion. Others muttered under their breath, making comments about how someone like him didn't belong in such a historic setting. Marcus heard it all but never let it show. His calm demeanor was unshakable, almost as if he wore armor beneath his uniform, an invisible shield forged from years of discipline and resilience. On this particular afternoon, the weather was unusually warm for London. Tourists bustled around, snapping photos and marveling at the iconic palace gates. Children giggled as they posed beside statues, while parents tried to keep them in check. It was a lively scene, one that made Marcus feel grateful for the simplicity of his job despite the occasional hostility he encountered. As he scanned the area, something caught his attention. A man walking toward him with purpose. The man looked wealthy, dressed in an expensive suit that screamed privilege. The large German shepherd trotted beside him, its sleek coat gleaming in the sunlight. The dog's piercing gaze locked onto Marcus long before its owner did. There was something unsettling about the way both the man and the animal moved, confident, deliberate, and slightly menacing. Marcus instinctively tightened his stance, though his expression remained neutral. He had seen enough in his life to know when trouble might be brewing. Still, he reminded himself of his training. Stay calm, assess the situation, and act only when necessary. Little did he know, this encounter would test not just his patience, but also his ability to handle unexpected threats without losing control.